Hello and welcome back to Funeral Industry Insights, the podcast where we tackle the important conversations that shape our lives and our futures. I'm your host, Michelle Dwyer, and today we're going to dive into a topic that might feel a little heavy, but trust me, it's one of the most empowering conversations you actually can have. Prepaying and pre-arranging your funeral. We'll also walk you through the legal responsibilities that funeral directors have here in Australia, because if you're going to make plans, it is important to know your rights and your protections. Okay, so let's get into it. First up, what exactly do we mean when we talk about pre-arranging or prepaying a funeral? So pre-arranging simply means you sit down and make decisions about your funeral ahead of time. Okay, so things like what type of service you'd like, whether that's traditional, religious, where you'd like your service held. Like some people may want a church, some people may want outside, they may want to just go to a crematorium chapel, whether you'd like a burial or a cremation, and then any other sort of special requests like favourite songs, readings, or even dress codes. Like some people are very specific with their instructions. So pre-arranging is great if you really want to say in how you want your funeral service to go ahead. Now, prepaying, on the other hand, that involves putting money aside for those arrangements. So you're not just planning, you're actually paying in advance to lock it in at today's prices, which then relieves your family from any financial pressure later on as well. So in Australia, you can do this through several methods. So there's funeral prepayment plans that you can do through a funeral home. And there's funeral bonds that are managed by like friendly societies or life insurance companies. But less commonly, you can set aside your own funds like into a dedicated bank account, which some people do choose to do. Okay. So some people also choose to take out funeral insurance instead. So that's a regular monthly insurance policy payment. So similar to your car insurance and your household insurance. These can be risky though, just due to if you were to happen to miss like a few payments as such, it may result in the policy being cancelled and then no refund is given on any of the monies that you've contributed either. Okay. So that's why funeral insurance can be a little bit riskier than the other options. So look, I know for us at Dwyer Family Funerals, we encourage our families to prepay using a funeral bond through a friendly society that we use that are based here in Australia and they're owned and managed. They're flexible. So you can start with as little as $50 per week contribution. Or you can just do a one-off lump sum, or you could do a monthly, whatever. They're really, really flexible, which is great. Okay. So, now, why do people choose to pre-arrange and prepay their funerals? Okay, so first of all, it does ease the burden on your family members during a very emotional time, especially if your death does come as a shock and is like, unexpected. Okay, so grief is tough enough without having to make rushed, expensive decisions, and especially when, your family, if you're one of those families that don't discuss death and things like that, then it's really hard for families at a time like that to make that ultimate decision on whether you would be preferred to be cremated or buried. And surprisingly, there are a lot of people out there that don't even understand what their family's wishes are. Okay, so secondly, it does give you that control. So you're able to make sure that your wishes are known and respected. Okay. And third, there are definite financial benefits. So prepaying, as I mentioned before, it locks in at today's prices, so it avoids future price rises. So in some states, such as New South Wales, prepaid funeral plans are also exempt from the assets test for the age pension, like with Centrelink. So that's a major consideration for retirees as well. Okay. So, okay, now let's talk about the legal side, because really, when you're putting thousands of dollars into something in advance, you need to know the rules. You want to protect yourself fully. Okay, so here's what Australian funeral directors must comply with. Okay, so in Australia, unfortunately, funeral directors are not very well regulated, so you do not require a formal license to operate. Okay, so while the industry isn't heavily regulated, some states may have specific requirements. So like Western Australia, for instance, they need a license sometimes to conduct funerals in some cemeteries. Okay, so just be mindful when you are dealing with funeral directors. There aren't a lot of regulations, so just keep that in mind when you're making your decisions. But if you do prepay, the funeral director must provide you with a written contract, and the contract should clearly outline the services and the goods that are included, so such as your coffin, flowers, those sorts of things. It should also state the total cost and whether or not the prices are fixed or if there's any extra fees that could apply later. Okay. Now, as far as trusts and insurance bonds go, so any money paid in advance must usually be placed in a secure investment, so like a trust fund or a funeral bond. Okay, so completely separate from the funeral home's own money. Okay, so this will protect your money even if for some reason the funeral home went bust, or they sold to somebody else, or if you were to move interstate, or you just wanted to change funeral homes altogether. Okay, so you just need to make sure that if that's in a secure investment, then that allows you to make those changes as to who you use as a funeral director later on as well. Okay, now, with regards to cooling off periods, look, some states require a cooling off period. So if you do change your mind shortly after signing, you can cancel the plan and get your money back if you've put any money down. I know some of the ones that I've had dealings with, I think there's generally a 30-day cooling off period. So always just check those as well. Okay, the same with disclosure or like your cancellation terms. Okay, so if, if you wanted to cancel as such, just ensure that there's, make sure that's all explained to you beforehand of any penalties or refunds or anything like that. Now, when it comes to the handling of your personal information, funeral directors must comply with the Privacy Act, okay? So whenever we're handling your personal and health information, your details are kept secure and they're only used appropriately. So just ensure, ask that question. You want to know those things. They're the questions that you want to know how this funeral director is going to use your information. So, that's just something you really want to be mindful of. Okay, so it's just some things to watch out for. So like anything that involves money, there are definitely things you need to be, really looking out. So is the funeral director reputable? So as I mentioned, they're not regulated. So always check your reviews, ask questions. Okay, so some funeral directors do choose to be members of an industry body. However, it's not mandatory requirement in Australia. Okay, so the other thing, as I mentioned before, what happens if you move interstate. So some prepaid plans are transferable and others are not. Okay, now this is going to largely come down to who you choose to pre-arrange and prepay with. Okay, there's a lot of big companies out there that you will only be able to prepay and use their funeral homes. Okay, now, yes, they've got them throughout Australia, but just be careful when you do sign into those contracts, you are forced to use one of their funeral homes. Okay, now, whereas if you did put your money into a funeral bond with a friendly society, if, you up and moved interstate or whatever, then your choice is open to use whichever funeral home you want. Okay, so look, the relevant insurer, as I said, a friendly society, etc., they're usually able to refer you to a new funeral director in your new location anyway. Now, one of the other things that you need to watch out for is just make sure all your wishes are covered. Okay, so because some funeral prepaid plans will include like a basic service, just be mindful and just ask the question, like, does this include flowers, funeral notices, any sort of order of service booklets or things. Just make sure everything is included if that's what your wishes are. But and this is why if you have a prepaid contract, it should be itemized there exactly what is included in your prepaid contract. Okay, so just be sure to have your funeral director fully list all the inclusions in writing so that your family are aware. When the time does come, if there are any extras that they know that they're going to need to pay for at the time of the funeral, okay? And just be sure to understand whether the prices are fully locked in or if they're subject to adjustment. But remember, look, when it comes to making any financial decisions whatsoever, especially those that are involving prepaid funeral arrangements, it's essential to seek appropriate financial advice or legal advice just to ensure your interests are properly protected. Okay. So to wrap it up, prepaying and pre-arranging a funeral in Australia is definitely a thoughtful way to care for your loved ones. It protects your financial interests and it makes sure that your final wishes are honoured. But it's also crucial to do your homework. So ask lots of questions, read the fine print, and only work with trusted, transparent funeral directors who are going to respect the legal standards that do protect you. Okay, so planning ahead might feel a little awkward at first, but it really is truly a gift to those that you love. Thank you once again for joining me today on Funeral Industry Insights. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit from it. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. I'm Michelle Dwyer. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.